I'm here today to talk about the future of urban mobility, about what this means for cities and the people who live in them, about how we can cut congestion, pollution, and parking, and providing access to transportation for those in need. It's easy to demonize the car. There are more than 1 billion cars in this world today. This is, I think it's like the population of the United States and Europe combined. But it's less the number that is a problem. It's more about how we use them individually. I mean, think about it. When you approach a traffic light, if you look to your left, to your right, it's very likely that there's going to be one person in the car, the driver. So if you drive alone, you're in good company. But that's just 5% of the problem. 95% of the time, cars just sit there, idle. This leads to up to 20% of the space in cities is used for parking. Not schools, not housing, not parks, but parking lots and parking spots. People are pushed into individual car ownership by design, by modern urban design. Here we see the city of New York, Manhattan, a city with an excellent public transit system, but even in this city, we see 2.7 million people commuting in and out of the city on a daily basis. Why is that? Because the subway doesn't get you straight to your doorstep and get you to the destination you want. So especially those who live in poorer neighborhoods that are less well connected to public transit, you rely on your own car, and once you get it, you're very likely to use it. This is the Uber app. And when we launched it, or when our founders launched Uber, they didn't think about any of that. I think they just found it very cool to pull your phone out, push a button, and get a ride. But when ride-hailing took off, what we realized is that the current status quo of the transportation system is inefficient, insufficient, and unequal. So the question is there an alternative to a world that looks like a parking lot and moves like a traffic jam? And we think if people start to share cars and use public transportation, we're on a pretty good way. But how do we get there? It's basically two things that matter. It's reliability and it's affordability. Let's look at reliability first. Here you see a map of Southern California, Los Angeles. And you see over time how the Uber service kind of spreads out from the city center to the outer parts of the cities, even to neighboring cities. And what you can see that nowadays, you have like a very, very reliable transportation network. I mean, most of those places you get a car in under 5 minutes. Make it under 10, but this is every day of the year. This is 24/7, right? So the reliability is there. This is an example from the US. Let's look at something closer. Let's look at Paris. A very different city, also very different people in Paris compared to LA, I would say. But the situation is pretty similar. Also here, we can see that spreading out from the city center to the outskirts, we established a transportation network that is really reliable. I mean, nowadays in Paris, and think about it, like 5 years ago, if it was raining in the middle of the night, it was pretty hard to get back to your hotel in Paris. And now we have this very reliable service. I want to highlight some use cases of Uber today. This is an example from London. What you see here, like the white area is basically the London city center. The white little dots are train stations, and all the blue lines are Uber trips. This is a snapshot of the morning rush hour in London. So what happens? Like 30% of all rides in London during the rush hour, they start in the outskirts, but they end at train stations. They don't go into the city center, but they end at train stations. So what do we see here? We didn't expect that, but users kind of show us how to use the product best. So we see that Uber and public transportation goes very, very well along with each other, right? So riders love combining options. And this is what's happening here. In case you didn't know, recently London launched the night tube, which is great because before that it was very painful to get around, to get around in London at night. It was good for us because we had long trips. People were going from the city centers to the outskirts where they lived because they had no other options. But as soon as the night tube was launched in London, we saw one thing. So immediately, in this white area, you see the city center, and all those dots are the subway stations again. And what you see is that in the city center, our business went really down. Like basically from the first day this tube was live, our business went down. Why is that? Because Londoners finally had an alternative, a good alternative, maybe even a better alternative to taking an Uber in the city. They took the subway, but what we also saw was that in the outskirts, the business was booming. Why is that? Because people combine things. You know, they take the subway out to the nearest train station to their home, but then for the last 1 or 2 miles, they get a car, they get an Uber, they ride home safely. So it's an excellent solution for the last mile, and it really shifted. That's super interesting. I want to show you like a typical demand curve, what it looks like. Those are 5 European cities, as an example: Amsterdam, London, Paris, Stockholm, and Warsaw. But it looks pretty similar all around the world. What do you see here? Usually we see a little peak around 8 p.m. What is happening there? I mean, you would go out for your first drink, go out for a restaurant or something, and then, what is interesting, around 12 a.m., 1 a.m., this is the time when we have our rush hour. This is the time when we do the most trips and when we hit the most requests hit our platform. And what happens at 12 a.m., 1 a.m.? This is usually the time when the bar closes. This is also the time when people might have 1, 2, 3 drinks, and you definitely don't want them to be driving behind the wheel themselves. And this is also the time when public transport is not shutting down. I wouldn't say that, but it's very limited. You have a train every 30 minutes. You have this inconvenience that in the past might lead to the situation that you rather drive yourself or you just stay at home and you don't go out at all. But now we have this reliability and we kind of go into that space, go into that spot when other alternatives are going down. Maybe one thing to point out here in case you didn't notice is, also all countries are very close by, but Paris for some reason does everything 1 hour later. So the dinner is 1 hour later and they also go home 1 hour later. So reliability is there, but reliability by itself, doesn't make people users of the product. You also need affordability. So a couple of years ago, our engineers noticed something. Actually, a lot of times, 1, 2, 3 people are going into the same direction at exactly the same time. I mean, this is not very surprising, and we definitely did not invent carpooling. I'm never going to say that. I mean, carpooling was very popular in the oil crisis, after World War II. Whenever gasoline was limited, and whenever people really had to carpool, but I think they always kind of hated it. They never really liked it. So we were also a bit cautious, but we thought about it. And actually, if you pool people together, if you make 1 trip out of 2 or even 3, this had a lot of advantages. I mean, for the rider, what are the advantages? You get a cheaper ride. That's a big advantage. What happens if you look at the driver? You have more riders in the back of your car. You have more paying minutes per hour. You have higher revenues, better utilization. So great advantages for the driver. What about cities? I mean, if you think about it, it's very simple. I mean, you transport more people with less cars. So it's actually a great idea. the question is, and the question we ask ourselves is, would people actually use it? Would people actually use a carpool product if we use advanced mobile technology to match those trips together? And the answer is a clear yes. In San Francisco, after 6 months of launch, we see 50%. Every second trip is pooled now in San Francisco. We didn't expect that. I think everybody was surprised, but it really works. What you see here on the screen is San Francisco, Market Street area, the busiest area in the city, and you see the traffic volume. On your left, you see the traffic volume before Uber Pool was launched in San Francisco. The yellower it gets, the more traffic you have. On the right, you see the same thing, the same area after Uber Pool was launched. And by the way, in case you didn't know that, I mean, we're in Munich now. Munich is the most congested city in Germany. I think on average, a driver spends, it's 49 hours. I mean, it's probably not compared to other regions of the world. But for Germany, or if you live here, I live in Munich, it's pretty painful. It's more than a work week per year you spend in traffic. And those approaches, I mean, those are just part of the solution that really help. Just to give you an idea, we're in 60 cities now globally with Uber Pool. In many of them, we see match rates of 50%. So 50% of trips are pooled. On a global scale, that leads to less miles driven, less fuel consumption, and less carbon emissions. Today, ride-hailing, and ride-hailing means you push a button, you get a car, and there's a driver driving that car. Something like Uber and a lot of local competitors all around the world. So 4% of all miles driven globally are currently ride-hailing kilometers. Morgan Stanley estimates by 2030 this will go up to 25%. So every fourth mile will be requested via an app. We think that one trend will really help to amplify this. And this is autonomous vehicles. Why is that? Because those technologies, they go hand in hand. I mean, just think about it. Those vehicles are beautiful, but they're very expensive. They're even, especially in the beginning, they're even more expensive than a normal car. And it's not just the price, it's also the opportunity cost that you suddenly have. Because think about it, I mean, every hour this car, and we learned about it, like 95% of the time usually those cars just stand somewhere. But this is time when you don't have to drive it, but this car can just like drive for you, can make you some money. So it doesn't make sense from an economical perspective to own those vehicles and just use them for yourself. So this is why we think that autonomous will be the next big step in ride-hailing. I just want to show you a quick video. Those cars are live in 4 US cities. For example, in Pittsburgh, if you request an Uber and you're lucky, you just get a self-driving car. We partner with Volvo and Ford. And also, we just announced that Daimler will put their self-driving E-classes on the Uber platform. So it's pretty cool. I mean, those cars are on the road right now. There's still a driver in the car, but he's not doing much. I mean, he's just enjoying being part of this. Like coming to an end, I just want to give you like another idea what the future might look like. This thing is called a VTOL. It's a vertical takeoff and landing drone. It's electric, it's autonomous, and it's pretty beautiful, I think. What we're thinking about, or not what we're thinking about, what we're working on at the moment is using those drones to bridge medium to long-range distances and make it very easy for people to commute. just look at this example here. I mean, imagine you would go from, in this case, it's San Francisco to San Jose. So basically, you would request an Uber Air, that's what it's called here. Like a normal Uber would pick you up, drive you to the next skyport, and you would fly. Let's look at a real-life example here. San Francisco to San Jose, it's like the equivalent in terms of distance from, I would say, from Munich to Ingolstadt from here, in case that rings a bell. This is also like a route that many people are commuting. On this one, we have like a couple of thousand people doing this back and forth on a daily basis. And if you look at the time, you see that by car, in this case UberX, it takes you 1 hour and 40 minutes. Why is that? Because it's rush hour, there's a lot of traffic. If you take the public transit, in this case the train, it's over 2 hours. Why is that? Because there's a lot of stops in between. It also does not start from your doorstep. And there's a lot of infrastructure that you need to build to have this up and running in the first place. Using a drone, like we're working on in this scenario, would save you on a daily basis almost 3 hours compared to a car. Just think about it. So the whole distance would be done within 15 minutes. I mean, it sounds a lot like science fiction, but the cool thing is, by 2020, for the World Exposition in Abu Dhabi, those drones will be up and flying. So the future of mobility is closer than we think. I want to thank you very much. I think I was the guy who was between you and lunch, so I hope you enjoy your lunch. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are you taking questions? Great. So one that just while it's coming up, one that just came in on Slido, which is a Q&A system. Do you know the average of riders that's sharing a ride with Uber Pool?
You mean the number?
Yeah, I think the number of riders is what they mean.
It's somewhere around 1.5, but it really depends on the city, and it also really depends on the use case. I mean, we see like higher seats occupied on, like, for example, airports to the city than the other way around, but you can't say it like, you can't give a global number, unfortunately, but it really depends.
My question is, with the increase of terror that we see around the world, what measures are taken to make sure that although that you are checking that the drivers that had the permission to operate Uber, that you are avoiding possibilities of various criminal activities?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is a serious topic. I mean, first of all, in all parts of the world, there are background checks run, right? Very extensive background checks. What we also do, in all the cities we're in, we work together with the local authorities very closely. So what we have, or what our technology enables as well, is that we collect feedback from riders, right, on a written basis. So we can also use this feedback to look for signals, and if there is something coming up, we can work together with the authorities. I mean, this is what's happening around the world. To be honest, I can't tell you. I run the operations business, and thank God in Germany, this is not a problem or an issue for us. But I'm happy to just shoot me an email, and I'm happy to follow up with the colleagues who unfortunately have to deal with those issues in other parts of the world. Yeah, thank you.
So maybe time for one or two more questions. One of them is actually a compliment, I think. Someone from Pittsburgh says autonomous Uber cars are fantastic.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm very sad. I never actually experienced it myself, so I'm very jealous to hear that.
So I'm going to rephrase the top question a little bit. So you were talking about reliability, timings, and estimates, and moving forward into autonomy, maybe. How you're saying reliability is now there, time estimates are not entirely accurate today. Kind of how can that be improved? Or how are you improving?
Are you talking about the ETAs that are shown in the app, or what does, who sent the question? Yeah. ETAs, okay. Yeah, I mean, ETAs are always a bit painful, but they're getting a bit better. I mean, we just enhanced the technology in a way that we work on our own mapping solutions now that will help a little bit in terms of GPS. But the main thing is also that based on prior pickups or prior pickup experiences, the system learns from it. And for example, what is happening now is if you are, let's say, if your pickup is in a one-way street, right? And the driver is maybe taking a little detour, the app will now tell you, hey, actually, you can save or you can cut the ETA by like 3 minutes if you just walk for like 50 meters and cross the street. So this is like, those are the first steps taken to kind of improve this by just telling the rider or educating the rider that by walking very small distances, like the ETA itself can be heavily improved. So this is what's happening at the moment.